A very, very good morning and warm welcome to each and every participant today. I'm sure there are many who will keep joining, and we really hope you will have a very good time today. It's a very bright and a good, beautiful morning today, Sunday, and thank you all for joining to this very unique journey that Isola Maharashtra chapter is trying to take you all. Many of you have been part of our earlier two sessions. So this current series that we have started is all about exploring the regional landscapes, and we have traveled through the beautiful two regions of Nashik and Aurangabad. And today we are at a very another very wonderful and splendid area or a region called Vidarbha and Nagpur. Today in the first session we will have a quick overview of the region and the western part of it would happen today. Before we start the proceedings, I will introduce our organization. We are ISOLA, Maharashtra chapter. ISOLA stands for Indian Society of Landscape Architects. I would just briefly switch on a video to give you a brief of what we have done till now. So we are the Maharashtra chapter of ISOLA. It was founded by Prabhakar Bhagwat sir. We are a member of IFLA, which is an international organization of landscape architects. And there are total 9 chapters. We happen to be one of them. The chapter is almost 2 years old, and we have been organizing various events in Pune. We discuss ecology, we discuss technical trends. We meet once or twice a year. We also conduct student workshops. We have always been fortunate to get a wonderful audience like you for most of our events. It's just that we are on a virtual world today. Otherwise, if this was an auditorium, I'm sure it is a full one today also. A warm welcome again to all the participants. Today's sponsor or donor happens to be Stone Studio, Mr. Manoj Shah. He has his showroom here in Pune, and for any natural stone requirements, it's him that we generally go to. Thank you so much, Manoj ji. Yes, taking ahead the session, I would like to introduce Sneha Mandekar. She is a landscape architect from BNCA, and now she's practicing and teaching in Nagpur. She would be the session moderator today, and she has a very, very beautiful personality, and we look forward for a wonderful session today. Welcome, Sneha, and I hand over the mic to you. All the best.
Thank you so much, ma'am. A very warm and fresh morning to one and all present. I, Architect Sneha Mandekar, welcome and thank you all for joining in today's webinar. I also would like to extend my gratitude to Isola Maharashtra chapter for giving me this opportunity to host this session on exploring regional landscapes. After traveling from Nashik, Aurangabad, today we will explore eastern part of Maharashtra, that is Vidarbha and Nagpur region. We always hear many stories and talks about various areas of Maharashtra, mainly western part. So this time we the Isola Maharashtra chapter, thought of exploring the eastern part of Maharashtra, which is Vidarbha, and share its unknown stories with you all. To brief about Vidarbha, it has been mentioned in the later Vedic text and Mahabharata. We also find the mention of Vidarbha in Bhagavad Purana in the form of Vidarbhi Rukmani, which literally means the one who is born in Vidarbha. Rukmani was the daughter of Bhismaka, the king of Vidarbha, who was married to the famous mythological character Krishna. The importance of Vidarbha continued into the historical period. An Ashokan inscription issued in the 14th regnal year by the Dharma Mahamadhya has been discovered from Detik, which is in Chandrapur district. It is well known in the sphere of Sanskrit literature as the play Meghdootam was possibly composed by Kalidasa here in Ramtek, which is also in Nagpur district. Even during India's independence struggle, Nagpur hosted various sessions of Indian National Congress several times. Sevagram in Wardha was arguably the capital of nationalistic India during the Gandhian era. Vidarbha has lush green deciduous forest, which is home to a variety of flora, fauna, and mineralodes. In short, to describe, Vidarbha has a rich mythological, historical, political, cultural, and ecological value as well, but which remains unexplored. Today, therefore, we have two eminent speakers from varied fields who will not only share their stories but enrich our knowledge about this region. I welcome our speakers and we are very grateful to them for their valuable time. Now, without wasting much of time, I would like to introduce our first speaker for the day, architect Pradyuman Sahasrabhojani, who will be briefly talking on the ecological importance of Vidarbha region. Pradyuman sir has graduated from VRC in Nagpur in 1982. So apart from his architectural practice, he has contributed as an urban designer and an environmentalist, handling temple, hill and other conservation works of Vidarbha Heritage Society as well as state archaeology. He has an outstanding professional front in various government bodies. IIN Nagpur Center, registered as valuer with Income Tax Department since 1995. Along with this, he's been an author for various articles regarding holistic approach for eco-development of cities and about appropriateness of indigenous approach towards architecture. In total, he has been working in multidisciplinary fields and has professional experience of more than 36 years. So now, without further ado, I would like to welcome and hand over the platform to Pradyuman sir.
Thank you, Sneha. Today we are talking about landscape of Vidarbha. So since we are talking about landscape of Vidarbha, the landscape actually can be divided into two parts because Vidarbha as Darbha, Pradesh of Darbha or grassland is only half of our original Vidarbha has been combined with some Jhadipatti area in the east of Vidarbha to form today's Vidarbha region. So ecologically and biogeographically, these are two distinctly different areas. So what we thought was that we'll divide this presentation in two parts, and next week we'll do the other part, which will be Eastern Vidarbha, and also we'll try to relate to landscape of Nagpur city per se. So that will be next week. When we start with this landscape of Vidarbha, we have to look at history and then of course geography of that area. The history is shaped by geography and vice versa. But the history doesn't just start with the historical account which we know from our books. It starts millions of years back. Whatever we see today can be related to the historical accounts which we hear from our history books, and all that is also shaped by what happened millions of years back. So Indian plate or the Jambudvip as we called it in our mythological or other texts, it was an island actually. So it was it floated. It was a part of the Gondwana supercontinent about 140 40 million years ago, it was all one. Australia, India, Antarctica, they were all combined together. But about 100 million years back, the Madagascar and Indian plate got separated, and this plate started floating uh, towards Eurasia or Asia, and struck the Asian continent about 50 million years back. So 50 million years it took for to travel from Madagascar to uh, the Himalayas. About 64 years, 65 million years back, it scraped over, this plate scraped over Reunion Island, what we call today as Reunion Island. So that's a ridge above which it went. And while it did so, an event took place which is shaping the life of people in Vidarbha today. So that's why it's important to look at this. As you can see, these two images, one is the way the Indian plate or Indian island actually is floating and then combining with the Asian continent. And on the right hand side, you can see the Deccan Plateau. And when it scraped over these islands, edges of this plate actually started spewing out and lava, and those eruptions resulted in a lot of things. One thing was that obviously all those Cretan geology which was there, the orange buff color which you can see is all Cretan geology, Dharwad Cretan and other Cretans, which are the oldest rocks, and there are very few older rocks than this in the world. But over these very old rocks, the lava flows started flowing, and that happened for 5 million years. So it was not a small event. The plate scraped over these islands for that much time because it was moving at that speed, and that scraping was causing lacerations in that crust of that plate, and the lava started flowing. The important thing about this is that the entire uh, topography of this Indian subcontinent changed, and not just topography of Indian subcontinent change, but this led to demise of the dinosaurs. So if the dinosaurs had not died, dinosaurs actually came into being about 235 million years back, and they died in this event around 65 million years back. So they had a very long reign of 170 million years, which is uncomparable to any other uh, people ruling this earth or living bodies ruling this earth. Uh, we humans are only a few lakh year old. So that reign came to an end due to this. And of course, there was another event in Yucatan province of Mexico. There was one meteor which fell there, and both these events together ensured that the dinosaurs were wiped out completely. And then the mammals took over, then the evolution took place, and we are here. So a lot of things were depending on this event which took place. So next slide. As you can see, Vidarbha sits right in the center of India. We all know that almost a 0 mile province of India, you could say. Even though Madhya Pradesh is called Madhya Pradesh, it is slightly towards the north. And as you can see, the Deccan Plateau we can see on that plate, and then there are two upland areas or high ridge areas. One is of course the Sahyadri or Western Ghat, and on the north of Vidarbha is the area of Satpura and Vindhyas. And because of these formations and the Deccan Plateau, of course, itself, the Deccan Plateau itself ends uh, near Nagpur, and from Nagpur eastward, it's a different kind of geology, and therefore different biogeographic provinces are created because of that. Vidarbha itself, as you can see in the slides, can be easily divided into two parts. One is the forest area or Dhadipatti, and the other is grassland or Darbhata Pradesh. and inside that Darbhata Pradesh also some part of that uh, hill range is coming in. Therefore, that is a slightly different landscape. Next, please. Next, please, Sneha. Okay. And this has shaped, and this together with the no, the previous one. The previous one. Yeah, this one. Yeah. This shaped. Sorry, again we are gone. The black and white one. Yeah, and this we have to look together with the uh, uh, administrative or political history of India. This shows the growth of British power in India, in which you can see the Nizam area, the central provinces, and these had a lot of influence on what happened to this area uh, ecologically, and Kaustubh will explain that. So I am just trying to show you the background, the context in which Kaustubh would be speaking. And as you can see, there are different types of tribes in Vidarbha. On the right hand side, you can see Rajgond and Gond tribes, which are dominant. And on the left hand, you can see the Thakur and mainly Phase Pardi tribe, with whom Kaustubh has worked very closely. So number of tribes, in most of the slides there are ladies, I think. So very, and their dress and all that, you can make out them very distinctly, the separate tribes. And I think this much introduction is sufficient for today. I will take up the more detailed biographic zoning of the eastern part of Vidarbha.
First, thank you so much, sir, for sharing such incredible and interesting information about Vidarbha. It was truly very stimulating experience and also explained how geographical setting has influenced the evolution of cultural landscape in this region. Now, moving on to the next presentation, as informed by Pradyuman sir, I would like to invite Kaustubh Pandhari Pandey sir. To introduce him, Kaustubh sir is working on grassland conservation through community-based eco-restoration past 20 years. He is actively working as a director on Samvedna project funded by UNDP with Phase Pardi community, which is a traditional hunting tribe to conserve lesser floricant species with the involvement of their traditional knowledge. He is also working on social issues of nomadic tribes through leadership development of local youth. Along with this, he is the principal investigator of Maharashtra Gene Bank program with IISER Pune, supported by RGSTC Government of Maharashtra. Kaustubh sir has been awarded various fellowships by Shruti Delhi, Ashoka Foundation, MB Gandhi Trust Award for conservation work, also felicitated by HSBC Bank for conservation work in bird race Nagpur. Apart from this, he has published 100 plus popular articles in local dailies and 3 research papers. So now I request Kaustubh sir to take over.
Thank you. Thank you, Sneha, and thank you, Pradyumna. Welcome all friends. So today we are going to talk about ecological history of Western Vidarbha, about which briefly Sneha and Pradyumna talked. The western part of Vidarbha is historically known as a Vidarbha, Varad. Varad has its own meaning and its own landscapes. So let's see. So these are the village youth and village childrens doing grassland herbarium. So it's very interesting thing in a village where we are working from last 20 years. These kids are very much into making up herbarium of grass species and identify them. So it's take this presentation as a story of my own journey, and which now is not my journey of myself only, but a journey of a community, a journey of a like-minded people all. So let's see, let's understand why these kids are very much interested into grass, and why they are identifying their grass resources, and why they are doing. herbarium. So the story began in 1989. The boy, you can see with the WWF hat, is me. When the story start when I was in 5th in 1989, and I started bird watching as a hobby. So from there, this journey of understanding is western part of Vidarbha is begin. Then, uh, then we started bird watching as a hobby. Then we joined Panda Nature Club, which is a nature club, typical nature club, like-minded youths. I joined that. Then we started working as a volunteer. I started working in conservation initiatives, like we on Maharashtra we have Maharashtra Pakshi Mitra Sammelans, bird watchers gathering. I volunteered myself into that. Then in 1999, I started working with Vidarbha Nature and Human Science Center, with which Pradyumna is very much attached, and Dr. Pimpalpure we have today. So the journey began in 1989 and 1999, 10 years I spent knowing birds, knowing habitats, knowing about ecology. We did a correspondence course of ornithology. Through this hobby, I realized that there are habitats, the birds prefer different kind of habitats, and so on. So in 1999, we as a VNHS, Vidarbha Nature and Human Science Center, we took up a project with help of Forest Department, where we have to identify the status of Lesser florican, this bird which is endangered now. It is assumed that we have only 22,100 birds in the world, and this bird species is only found in Vidarbha in Maharashtra. Elsewhere, you cannot find Lesser floricans. So we started working on surveys of Lesser florican. We started knowing about the things, finding. We tried a lot to see, to identify Lesser florican, to see Lesser florican, to cite Lesser florican. But in vain, we spent around 1 year. But people shown very much various things on the name of Lesser florican. Some individuals shown very funny things on the name of Lesser florican, but that is other story. Then I come in contact with Phasei parvis, because they come into picture from 1864. In 1864, Hume is a ornithologist who wrote a book which is known as Game Birds of India, Burma and Ceylon. So there he mentioned that Phasei parvi is a traditional hunting tribe. They used to hunt wildlife, wild animals and birds. They use their own sophisticated techniques, and they utilize grasslands. And he also very much elaborated the way Phasei parvis help Britishers to hunt Lesser florican. He also elaborates the knowledge they have of their own ecology, grasslands. So we all working on the project to identify, to cite Lesser florican, to know its status in Vidarbha, because historically there were few records of Lesser florican found in Vidarbha. So this way I came in contact with Phasei parvis. Then we decided to take a help of Phasei parvis to cite a Lesser florican, to know about it. And in 1999, 98, 2000, I spent a lot of time with Phasei parvis, and they they told me that, oh, 8 days before we cite a lesafloricon, or 3 months before we ate one. So it was like surprising for me. The bird which we try to cite from last 1 year, Phasepardis, are telling that it's very easy, and they very coolly tell about lesafloricans. So, but uh, during the uh, project period, I met this person who is a Himmat Pawar. He is a resident of Shisa Masa village, which is very nearby Akola. So he is the one who shown lesafloricon to us. Dr. Pimpalpure was also there. I went to Akola from that time. I was in Nagpur. We went to Akola and we identified lesafloricon. So, meeting Himmat Pawar, citing lesafloricon is uh, first background part of the landscape. Before that, everyone of all of us known Vidarbha uh, as a Pradyumna said, eastern part is known for forest and coal, and western part is very much known for cotton. You ask any school going kid that for what Varad is famous, he said he will tell you that it's famous for cotton. White, Amravati, Akola, all these area is very much known for cotton. But when I interacted with Himmat Pawar and I started reading things and about the area, I realized that this is not true. That the part of Western Vidarbha uh, is actually not known for historically not known for only for cotton, but it's known for known as a Vidarbha. As Sneha mentioned that the Rukmini is hometown or her birth town is Kaudinyapur, which is near to Amravati, and I started realizing what Vidarbha means. As Pradyumna said, the land of Darbha, but there are two stories. Here we start to understand the landscape. There are two stories about Darbha. Darbha is a grass which mainly grow in wetlands. So there are two stories. One is when people came to Vidarbha, cross Vindhya, they see a lot much of area which is covered by grasses. That's why the area historically known as Vidarbha, that means Vipul Darbhansa Pradesh, which is the area with ample grass on a landscape. Then there is another story that Darbha is a grass species which grows in wetlands, near wetlands, and it has its own space in Hindu rituals. So Darbha is a very important. We all, some of you may know about the Darbha. So this is the area where you cannot find Darbha, and in Sanskrit, V is also used as a symbol of scarcity. So these two stories are there, but these two stories are very much fit to the area. If this Darbha is a wetland grass, the western part of Vidarbha is typically dry, less water bodies, and less groundwater, similar to Marathwada. So Darbha story also fit to the narrative. Then the other story, which is ample, the landscape which has ample grass, is also fits because Phasepardis, they are traditionally hunters, but they hunt grassland birds. They used to hunt grassland birds. So, and lesafloricon itself is an indicator of good grassland. We have um, Great Indian Bustard near to Nagpur, and we travel to the western part of Maharashtra. Uh, we see more drier parts, less forested areas. So these are the things which indicate that the area is not similar to the eastern part. So as I mentioned that Himmat Pawar shown us a lesafloricon. He helped us to see the birds, photograph the birds. And that time, this is a beautiful bird. We cannot tell we cannot tell that it's a male or female, because in non-breeding season, its coat is similar. Male and female coat is we cannot identify. Sexually dimorphism is not there. So we cited a female, and with the help of Himmat Pawar, it is proven that the lesser florican is there. We have grassland patches, and there is a possibility of working on conservation of lesser florican. So in 2001, we decided that this landscape is very much important, because endangered bird like lesser florican is found, and maybe there are possibilities that it breeds here. Then there is a very knowledgeable community, Fasepardis, and they know all about grassland, and they are into big livelihood crisis. They need help. So we started working with them. Well, till 2001, I was not very much aware about the ecological history. But in 2007, Dr. Lakshman Satya, he is a professor in history. He teach in Lock Haven University, Pennsylvania. He wrote a book on especially ecological history on western part of Vidarbha, which is known as Ecology, Colonialism and Cattle in 19th century Central India. He especially take an account of western part of Vidarbha, which is, as I mentioned, known as Varad, and he gathers systematically archival material, and he narrates a story of the area before Britishers came, what was the situation, and how Britishers colonial regime intervene into the area ecological processes. And what we all know about Vidarbha is, especially Varad, is linked with this story, and we are very much fortunate that we translated the book, and we now it's available in Marathi for all the Marathi speakers. So let's come to the Lakshman Satya's book and its ecological history of the area. So this is the map of arid and semi-arid zone of India. You can very much see that the western part of the Maharashtra is in semi-arid zone. So it's always non-forested grassland dominated area. And when Britishers came in Vidarbha, Varad especially, they came in 1853. So why they came to Varad in 1853? So the situation is, in 1853, there was a war situation in Egypt, and Britishers facing scarcity of raw material in Manchester industries, where they basically produce cotton clothes. So they are in search of the area where they can promote cotton, and this this decline in supply of raw material can be fulfilled. So they come to know, because in during 17th century, they know India and East India Company almost arrived in India. They explore the area, and they know that western part of the Vidarbha is very much suitable for cotton. So in 1853, they first visit, and there was one British bureaucrat who elaborated the area, which was, like he said, till the horizon you can see the grass, and there are hardly any trees. He said it's like a savanna, and there are different kind of livestock. After every 50 or livestock breed after every 50 or 60 kilometers. Then he traveled to a village known as Pimpalkhuta in Wardha. He described Pimpalkhuta as a Denmark of India. Even today, you went to Pimpalkhuta. Pimpalkhuta is, and the area, surrounding area, Asti, RV, that area is known for livestock, which is traditionally known as a Gaulau. Gaulau cows are very famous, and older people know that Gaulau is a very important breed, cow breed, which Lord Krishna, there is a mythological story that Lord Krishna brought Gauraus to the Rukmini, and then Gauri people used to rear them. So British, then in gazetteers, Britishers wrote about one another thing, which is Kunda. Kunda is a grass species which is very much harmful for Britishers to convert the land, try to convert the land uh, into cotton. Uh, Actually, in 1853, when they come and they have a treaty with Nizams of Hyderabad, they decided to convert the land from grasslands to cotton agriculture. So they started initiating this. Before that, the area is not known for private land. There was no concept of private land before 1853. Britishers came, they introduced private property Zamindari Act. They changed all administrative systems, and they literally converted 28 lakh hectares of land from grassland and pasture land to a cotton field. You uh, you surprised to know that cotton production in 1853 rise up to 20% in 1903. So these mass conversion of land from grasslands to cotton agriculture happened, and that impacted on various things. First, it impacts food and nutrition security, because local communities uh, used to sow traditional crops like millets, sorghum, jowar, bajra, then oil seeds. They used to uh, use in their agricultural lands. So these all traditional crops are suitable for the local conditions, like local rains, local soil type. But Britishers dominantly introduced cotton, and they all uh, tried to eradicate all these traditional crops. So as a result, there were many things happen, which we will see in the future. So these are the two specimen of Lesser florican. Left is a male, which is with black color, and right one to me is a female. So these two specimens are kept in Nagpur Central Museum. Even today, these specimens are there. These specimens are collected by D. Abru, who was a curator of that museum. The Nagpur Central Museum is established in 1864. Anyone who is interested in culture, history, ecology, anything in of Vidarbha must visit this museum. We used to visit the museum very frequently, because there was a very rich gallery on birds. As you know, Britishers very much interested in hunting game birds and these things. So D. Abreu collected these lesser florican samples in 1912, and he wrote that the lesser I went to collect the lesser florican specimen in early in the morning, and I came back uh, with 38 individual samples, and the work finished before the breakfast. That means he went to collect the lesser florican sample for his museum, and he came back around 10:30, and he could shot 38 lesser florican male and females. So that means in 1912 we have ample amount of uh, uh, grassland biodiversity. These specimens, which we can even today we can see in the Central Museum, indicates the biodiversity richness in the area. Then these are the photographs I captured from the archival material at various centers. So Britishers, what they do with grasslands and what they do with grassland biodiversity, as we seen that lesser florican hunted by Fasepardis also, but they have their own rules, they have their own gadgets, and they have their own methods of hunting. So that is another story that I will tell if time will permits us. So these are the pictures of Britishers lesser florican hunting, how they used to hunt. Uh, these are the male floricans, which indicates that the birds are not hunted for flesh or uh, for the eating purpose, but for the game, because males are more attractive, and hunting male is a part of prestige for Britishers. So these are the birds killed by British hunters, and today, unfortunately, we blame Fasepardis for the decline of population in Lesser Florican. So these are the real narrative of grassland degradation and grassland biodiversity degradation. So the uh, drastic landscape change in western part of Vidarbha resulted into these type of vast biodiversity loss. In addition to, there was three very drastic famines in 1872 and in 1882 and in 1898. There was three droughts in Vidarbha. Dr. Lakshman Satya said earlier with me, we regularly contact with him. So he said before these three droughts, there was no history of major drought in Varad since last 3000 years. So that much impact this landscape change brought. So these uh, three droughts resulted into, because of the drought, there was around 3 lakhs casualties of livestock and 1 lakh casualties of uh, human beings. So I don't want to show the pictures of that drought, but those are very important historical account. So these are the pictures. So when I first saw the picture, I was shocked. These are the pictures taken by Kodak camera, which is very disturbing. So these are the result of British administration, British management of natural resource. So uh, these droughts impacted a lot, biodiversity impacted a lot, and even today we and forest department and some conservationists say that lesser florican is in decline because of Pasepardis and local communities. In this picture, you can easily see that this is the male it is doing display, and you can see the farm laborers who can easily and comfortably work in the background. So we must understand that grasslands are the habitat which are always accompanied by livestock and human beings. So conservation of Lesser florican is not like conservation of tiger. We don't need to isolate human beings and livestock from grasslands, but it started from the British era, and even today we are trying to impose a tiger conservation model on the Lesser florican, and we are trying to imply same model. Now, so this is the history, which actually is tell us the story of around 3000 years history, which comes into existence with the interdependence of communities, and most of the communities of Warad and Marathwada were pastoralists. They keep animals for their livelihood, and most of the kings you see, like Krishna, Vidarbha, then Satvahan, then Vakatakas, all those are pastorals. They keep animals for their livelihood. So this indicates the region, and this indicates the picture as a mosaic. We can say that Vidarbha is Western Vidarbha is dominantly a grassland area, and the communities, agrarian communities, are very few. People used to mainly used to rear animals, and we have very diverse kind of livestock breeds. Then we have enriched grassland biodiversity like Lesser florican. We have Great Indian bustard. Unfortunately, the Great Indian bustard is in decline in Varora, but still, in comparison to Maharashtra, we have Lesser florican, and ours, where we are working, is the only site where you can see Lesser florican even today, and the bird is breeding. So this is the background, and now I quickly tell you about what we are doing. And as I know, as I tell you that the story, the ecological history, the British era is not known to a common man. Even bureaucrats don't know, forest department don't know, planners don't know about this ecological history, because that is not very much the issue of very about which very much talked. So so uh, so as I said earlier at the beginning of the presentation, so we come to know about all this, and I and with the community members realize that the grasslands and livestock keeping is a historically very important part of the landscape. So Phase Pardi youths, those are not interested into a traditional livelihood, which is hunting, because it's banned. In addition to that, there are many changes happen which they cannot control, like people use pesticide, insecticide, people use weedicides, that was creating very much harm to the bird population, and because of that, hunting is not a sustainable livelihood for them. So Phase Pardi youths are in search of optional livelihood. So when we tried various options, then we realized that there must be a option which was already chosen by community, because if there is a problem in traditional livelihood, their community must come up with the answer. So these two youths are my friend. One is Kuldeep and Seva. They told us that historically we kept livestock like cows. We rear. We had goats and sheep and various other animals, and part of livelihood was gained through that. So what we start is we start to rejuvenate grasslands. So this is the picture, is the present picture, and this is the picture in 2006 when we started working on grasslands. So, but I was, as I was telling you, the very fascinating ecological history of grasslands. But when we reach to the area of Varad, to the Akola, Amaravati, and various parts, we cannot see grasslands because all the area of traditional grasslands was encroached and converted into agricultural land, and eventually that agricultural land, which was earlier a zamindari land, got converted into a private land. So we have very less patches of common lands. Like this is the typical forest land in western Vidarbha. You might uh, feel funny to see land like this is as a forest, but that is categorized as a forest. So we started, community youth said that livestock keeping could be a very important and useful livelihood option for Fase Pardis, and we are very much interested into that. But fodder is a very big issue. Then we realize if the Vidarbha and the area is known for the grass, is if the situation is like that, we have to do something. So with the help of village youths, we started. We are say we trying to conserve grasses, and we try to manage their lands through. There was an act known as a Biodiversity Act. So we started with a Biodiversity Act, which gives right to local communities to conserve their biodiversity. So we established Biodiversity Management Committee, and village youths fence their forest land to uh, stop from overgrazing. We talked with village elders about ecological history and how the grassland resources were managed. They tell very interesting stories that the agriculture is not annual activity. Nearly 60-70 years before, there was a rule to give a rest to the land after every cropping year. So there was a system of resting of 3 years, and then every 4 year land utilized for agriculture. So these kind of meeting and interactions enrich us with the experiential knowledge of communities. As a result, in just in 3 years, this is a very important picture. This grass is known as a Paunia. Paunia is botanical name is Sehima norvosum. So Paunia is very important grass in uh, pastorals and livestock keepers life. So in Nagpur, people used to, even in Wardha, people used to say that we have Paunia ghee. That means ghee which come into existence from Paunia. So this much of importance space in livestock keepers life that this Paunia grass is. Even Bahina Bai in his poems wrote that if you want to celebrate a Pola and give real happiness to a bullock, you give him a judy of this Paunia grass. So Paunia is very nutritious and very important grass. So from just in 3 years, we come with the yield which very much satisfying. And the village is known as Vadala, which is in Barshi Takri Taluka in Akola. That village now known as the only village in Vidarbha which purchased livestock through selling of grass. So actually the situation is altogether different in Maharashtra. People have to sell their livestock for because of the scarcity of the grass, but Vadala story is uh, other way around. So this is the present situation. And now the story is not only of Vadala. There are many villages, many livestock keeping communities are interested into this eco restoration activity. Communities only fence the area and stop the area from overgrazing, and nature do its own work, and this regeneration happens. And then when grass seeds drop down, communities cut the grass and utilize it for the summer periods. So this is very interesting site where communities rejuvenate their grasslands from merely about after 100 years. So these are the ecological society participants. They come every year at our site to see the rejuvenation. And now this is not only with Phase Pardis, but we are working on 1,000 hectares of land where different communities, livestock keepers and agrarian people rejuvenate their grasslands. The initiative is very much awarded into 11th Conference of Parties of Convention on Biological Parties, Biological Diversity, and the initiative is awarded through First India Biodiversity Award in Hyderabad. Presently, we are also working with Forest Department. Forest Department is earlier they don't understand the grassland is also a type of ecosystem, and growing grassland rather than big trees is also a mandate, should be also a mandate of Forest Department, and it's also a conservation work, because we have our own fancy ideas of conservation. Conservation means us only growing trees, and that is the only idea of conservation. But now, unfortunately, in Vidarbha, Western Vidarbha, we have 42,000 hectares of land, which is categorized as a fodder reserve from Forest Department. And I'm not talking about all forest land. 42,000 hectares of land is even today is we have as a grassland reserve. And now Forest Department, with the help of Forest Department, we are trying to use these lands as a grassland, and we hope that again ecological small part of ecological history is came into present, and we could see the lesser floricans and other biodiversity, and also we could help communities through grassland rejuvenation. In addition to that, lastly I want to mention that grassland conservation is not only for to conserve the grassland birds and to help the communities through fodder, but grassland also impacted various other aspects, like the grass cover improves the soil moisture and groundwater, and we have a documented history of our work where the groundwater is increased because of grass cover on land. So there are n number of other benefits to community, and this is now this is the picture taken by me in 2017 where male lesser florican is displaying. And I'm very much happy to tell you that Not only, even today, not only we could cite Lesser-Florican males and females, but in 2007, with the help of Fase-Pardi friends, we could record the nesting of Lesser-Florican, which indicates that the bird is breeding. This is the only site in Maharashtra where breeding of Lesser-Florican is identified, and which indicates that the grassland's importance in communities' life, in birds' life, and in biodiversity, and its importance. And our work is a limited work, which is based on ecological history and the present day possibilities of rejuvenating or eco restoration of grassland is possible. I think there is a need of political will. In addition to, there is a need of initiatives by forest department, government officials, and various departments to think about this ecological history, not only for the sake of conservation, but you all might know that we have very serious present situation and agrarian crisis in Varad, Akola, Washim, and Yavatmal is known for the farmer suicides, and this all has link with this history, because we converted all the lands into agriculture, and these are not the area where agriculture is sustainable, or you can uh, survive on only on the agriculture. But there are other options like livestock keeping. We can do grassland conservation. We can provide nutritious grass to the country, and even I can say, as in Wardha, one Britisher said that the Pimpalkhuta is the Denmark of India. So there are ample possibilities, but there is a need to understand the history and understand the present. And I hope the because of our work, this is a kid of Fase-Pardi kid. Now they have their new relationships, new bondings with livestock, and there are new relationships with nature is emerging. And let's fingers crossed that uh, our government and we also are advocating with the different areas, and we hope bright future for grassland, local communities, and grassland birds and biodiversity. Thanks. So all these efforts are supported by various agencies, and I'm not a person of uh, uh, academy, or I'm not academician, or I'm not a researcher. I'm the one only work with communities, and all this is my experiential knowledge, and I'm very much interested to have it more communicative. So you all are welcome to uh, ask any questions to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for an in-depth talk and an enlightening presentation. I must say, your contribution to this ecosystem and towards such endangered species is sensitive and a dynamic approach. This front of Vidarbha, where grassland were so ecologically important, was really unfamiliar and hidden thing of this region to all of us. And now I think everyone will have a different vision towards its magnificent ecological setup. So before I hand over the platform to Shruti ma'am for question and answer session, I would like to just share a quote by Mahatma Gandhi. What we are doing to the forest of the world is but nothing but a mirror reflection of what we are doing to ourselves and one another. Thank you so much. Shruti ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Sneha. And thank you, Kaustubh sir, for this wonderful, wonderful presentation. So very in-depth, as rightly said by Sneha. Let's quickly go to the question answer session, and the chat box is full of appreciation of what people have just seen. Amazing presentation. People are really appreciating it a lot. Let's start with the first question. Aditi Galande, can you unmute yourself and ask the question that you want to?
Yeah, yeah. Hi, everyone. Firstly, sir, thank you so much. It was an amazing presentation. And very important perspective that we got. So I have two questions, sir. I'll ask the first one and then the second one as well. So the first one was when you talked about these droughts which happened. So these droughts were result of the land use change and the hunting and the overgrazing, is it?
Yes, not actually hunting, because as I say, Pasepardis have their own rules and methods of sustainable hunting because they are doing the same from thousands of years. But the landscape change which was made by Britishers, they converted 29 lakh 29 lakh hectares of land from grasslands to cotton field, which resulted into a drought.
Okay, okay. And my second question is that while we are doing this grassland conservation, so who is the natural predator of this region, and is it endangered also, and or has it become extinct?
There are various natural predators. Unfortunately, we lost cheetah. The area is also known for cheetah. We have a community which is known as a Chite Pardi. They used to hunt with the help of cheetahs, and cheetahs are the main predator. But as I told about the hunting of Lesser Florican, Britishers used to hunt with the cheetahs, and even you might know Akbar have also a pack of cheetahs of 3,000 cheetahs, and we always hunt these type of carnivorous predators. And tiger is a fortunate species that we have some tigers, and we have um, uh, some dignity to tiger population, but unfortunately cheetahs are not there. So because of that also the kind of situation is happening.
Okay, okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Aditi. There are a lot of messages of appreciation also. Rajuli Mukherjee, would you like to say something or ask something? You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi ma'am. This is architect Rajuli Mukherjee.
Yes.
I would say a big shout out to all the presenters, to you, to Sneha. It was a wonderful session. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks.
The next question, I can read it. It is from Rashmi Tijare. Rashmi, would you like to unmute yourself and ask the question?
Good afternoon, everyone. It was wonderful presentation. I would really like to congratulate the team, Isola team, and Sneha and Pradyumna sir. My question was where the Britishers came and stayed here and made this as their constituency in Vidarbha zone, just because we had very rich flora and fauna in our region, and till what extent they have destroyed it, and is there any such records of the destroyed flora and fauna from Nagpur and Vidarbha zone? And are still is there anything like is it like still we are facing many problems, environmental issues due to that British regime in those few years? Is
Yes.
it so?
Yes, definitely. Britishers arrived in 1853, and they clubbed Varad with Vidarbha with CP, Central Province, in 1903. The 50 years of ecological destruction and landscape change happened, and there is a very fine account, elaborated account in the book of Dr. Lakshman Satya, about which I present, and that
Okay.
book is unfortunately out of what it's not available on the net or with Oxford University Press. I come to know that Oxford University Press is going to reprint it, but the only motto behind Britishers arrive in the Varad is a black cotton soil, which was very suitable for cotton growing, and eventually they set up infrastructure. You might surprised to know that Nagpur Bombay rail track is just for the sake of cotton extraction. Then cotton mill established in Nagpur. Then there is a small railway track from Murtizapur to Yavatmal that was established just to extract cotton from the area. So eventually there was a boom in industrialization. There was a boom uh, in cotton production, and because of that there was economic growth also. But uh, when Britishers uh, 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 received good quality cotton from other parts, like war situation finished in Egypt, they withdraw their intention from Vidarbha, and uh, uh, they go back and they started because of freedom fight struggle. So we must understand that the situation is industrial development or infrastructural development is not only for the development of the area, but to extraction and uh, the economic loot was the main motto behind the Britishers. And the area is actually not known for the uh, economic distress. Or you might know the town where I am sitting, Karanja Lad, is looted by Shivaji in 1658. The kind of wealth we are having because of these ecological condition, because of these livestock based livelihoods, Shivaji attempt to loot Karanja all the way from Satar. He came to Karanja, and there was a story that he looted 4,000 bullock carts of gold coins. So that is another story. There was other stories of economic wealth of the area. So the what I'm willing to tell is the area is not economically developed because of British, but it was developed because of the community's own wisdom and community's own resource management and landscape management practices.
Snehal, would you want to ask your question?
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon. I think he
Good
already
afternoon.
answered during his presentation, but I'll repeat it again. So my question was, is this one of the reasons why Vidarbha faces farmer suicide? Thank you.
Yes, as I tell that, yes, there are these historical changes from cropping pattern to landscape use. Then we have lost many traditional varieties of our crops. Then we lost many breeds of cattle, like where I'm sitting. There is a very important livestock breed which is known as Umberda, which was very suitable for agriculture in landscape like these. So we don't have any specimen left of Umberda breed. Now even today the important breed which I told about, Gaulau, is there. The scientists said that only 50 true type individuals of Gaulau are there in Wardha. So Gaulau is a breed which gives 8 liters of milk, and the bullocks are used for draught cattle. So because of its white skin, it used for the agricultural activities. So there are very huge damage on the landscape and community and resource and biodiversity. And definitely because of this we are facing uh, agrarian crisis. In addition to that, it is very unfortunate that like Britishers bring cotton crop like cotton, which communities cannot eat, the residues cannot be fed to animals. Our government, our own independent government, is introducing soybean. Soybean is also exotic crop which cannot be used as a food, and the residues cannot be fed to livestock. The same story is unfortunately happening, for which we have to work on.
Sir, Rucha's question was, were there any particular practices by the tribes for grassland conservation?
Yes, as I mentioned that resting of land after every cropping year is very much documented. In addition to that, every village has its own grasslands, which is known as gairans, and there are historical references in Smrutis. Like I could not add the text from Shrutis to today's presentation, but there are in Yajnavalkya Suchi, there is a mention of land should be conserved for the sake of livestock. In addition to that, there was systematic grassland management practices, like overgrazing is not happened because of the area demarcation. In addition to that, people used to maintain the carrying capacity with their own traditional wisdom. We have documented these kind of management practices. In addition to that, Pasepardis have their own grassland management practice. Every community which is dependent on the resource, they try to use it sustainably, and sustainability is integral part of their management and utilization system. Though one should not forget that there were traditional bads in the traditional systems too, like caste system was there. There was no shift of livelihood. So these are the things which we can consider even today. But I think as with the help of science and with the help of technology, which is very much helpful for resource utilization and management, we definitely can reverse it and bring a good future to the landscape.
Yes, sir. Swati Sahasrabuddhe, would you like to ask your question? Kindly unmute yourself.
Wonderful presentation, sir. I have been
Thank you.
following you on your Facebook and other informative sessions. So it was really wonderful to hear you on this platform. Thanks to all. I just have one question, maybe not. I was just overwhelmed with the way you are working with community rather than imposing anything from outside. It comes very inherently from the community for their own land. So I just wanted to know, like, what was your experience when an expert like you or an outsider like you comes in and works with them, and how do you what kind of relationships build up in this whole journey, and how do you look at this and towards this whole conservation with community approach? And could you just give us some words of wisdom on this?
Fortunately, I had good mentors, one of which is present in today's session also, Pradyumna, then Dr. Pimpalapure. We have Dr. Lord Kedkar sir was a very good mentor. Then I have Datta Savale was a mentor. He influenced me a lot to the way I work with the communities, and the key is not to do for, but to do with. So we are not working for the communities, but working with the communities. Like I always says that this is like a jigsaw puzzle, and as a bird watcher, I too have my own piece to fit into the jigsaw puzzle of this complex landscape and complex situation. And I want to conserve Lesser Florican as a bird watcher. Community want fodder, then someone else want groundwater. So all these pieces must be fixed into it, and we are trying to create a picture. But I think most important is working with community is, I don't know why people think that it's very hard, very complicated, but I think it's very simple. You do a friendship with communities. We have 3 sutris like Samparka, Samvad, and Sahwas. So always be in contact, always be in communication, and always spend the time with the communities. And it's like a gradually growing thing. You can, like friendship. So friendship is a key of working with anyone. Even in office, we work not only as employees, but when we work as a friend, there will be a ecosystem. Then only a good work with healthy relationships and atmosphere will happen. So that is that is like that.
थँक्यू व्हेरी मच सर. खूपच छान. संपर्क, सहवास आणि संवाद अप्रतिम.
Yes.
थँक्यू सर. थँक्यू.
Thank you so much. Sonal Chitnis, would you like to go ahead and ask the question? Unmute
Yes.
yourself. Yes.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you, Kaustubh sir, for this interesting interaction. I just have one query, as in, like you mentioned about the interventions done by Britishers or their irrespective intentions, they brought up a certain change in certain sections of types of land cover, I would say. Probably, can we look at other cultural agents in history and then subsequent to Britishers who might have brought such changes to the landscape? Some might be profitable or useful, and some might be hindering, maybe. I would like to have your opinion on it. Thank you.
Very interesting question. As I mentioned that there was a economic boom initially, so there were communities. Those are having capital. They invested their capital into cotton ginning and milling, mills and transportation. So these type of industries thrive, but the benefit goes to the upper and richer section of the community. Like I know one family which belongs to Karanja. They have their own company in 1901, and they have their own share in Bombay Stock Exchange, a price of which is 100 rupees a share at that time. So like it happens always, opportunistic communities and individuals and families took benefit of this. And in addition to that, the second part is we evident Jangal Satyagraha in Yavatmal. We know that there were forest agitations, and even we can say that the democratization of Indian National Congress happens through Warad and Vidarbha. When local communities agitate against the forest laws and legislations, then only Congress realized that we have to come on ground and talk with communities, and we have to gather these feeling of local communities against British rule. And the situation has both the reactions from our own people, some opportunistic people and some opportunistic individuals take benefits, and those who are sufferers, Madhav Gadgil call them ecological refugees. They agitate, and we brought freedom struggle into existence, and we have important role in this also. Someone asked about traditional crops of the area. So
Yes.
If there is no question, I can say that millets are the important, then oil seeds, then we have mainly jowar, moong, urid. These are the main traditional crops, and it has very important and very interesting link with the crop diversity, has very interesting link with the habitat of Lesser Florican and Great Indian Bustard. Even today, where we cite Lesser Florican and Great Indian Bustard, these are the areas where crop diversity is rich. Like we visited Varora, where Great Indian Bustard is cited. So we count traditional crops. There were 18 crops, even 3 years before. So there is a link with the crop diversity and biodiversity.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Let's go to the next question. Amit Pimpre, can you unmute yourself and ask the question you would want to ask? Amit?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, Amit, go ahead.
Okay. It could be a very mammoth task, but I just wonder, whether there has been any conscious effort taken towards mapping all the grasslands in the districts of Vidarbha region, which could be a great resource and information, not only for the forest department, but also for the development and planning while doing that. And also a great resource for the architects, planners, environmentalists, and ecologists, and landscape architects who would be, working in Vidarbha region while doing large development, working on large development projects, industrial and other infrastructure projects. I think this needs to be taken into consideration, and I'm sure we have latest technology such as GPS and remote sensing at the fingertips. So I think this needs to be mapped. I'm sure any initiative must have already been taken in this direction, Kaustubji.
Yes, ATRI is a Bangalore-based trust which works on ecological issues. They have mapped grasslands in central India with the help of satellite technology. Then Forest Department also have systematic category of fodder reserve in forest lands, though we cannot say that all fodder reserves are good grasslands, but there are these two important resources we have to begin with. In addition to that, there was a historical, recently historical literature is there. So yes, not very sophisticated documentation is there, but there is a documentation.
And would it be available for to public domain for them to use?
Yes. Forest Department document is very much available. You can go to Forest Department website, and there is a column of working plan, and every working plan has a table of land use and land categorization. So they have fodder reserve data on their website, district wise.
Right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yes.
Rukaiya, would you want to ask your question? Kindly unmute yourself.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, sir, for the presentation. I have a very broad scale question, like maybe in terms of the country. Like you said, the grasslands are very fragmented in the country, and like now we see that they are very isolated in like national parks and everything. And these are very important habitats for certain herbivores that are very shy, like Barasinghas and other deers. So how do we start to connect these grasslands, because their habitats are getting very fragmented and they don't travel in any other sort of environment. So how is there a way like you suggest to connect these isolated spots, especially through agricultural lands?
Okay. As I said, the tiger conservation model is not suitable for grassland because of these several issues, like grassland is a very complex and different kind of ecosystem. In addition to that, livestock and human activities are inevitable part of grassland. Also, agriculture is also a part of seasonal grassland utilization. So, I think through my experience there must be more and more livestock development. There must be more and more involvement of pastorals and livestock keeping communities. They even today have affinity with grass species, grasslands and livestock. So we have to work really with the communities, and communities will on their own convert their agricultural land into grassland. And this is not fancy statement. In Marathwada, where I visited, n number of Dalit families, they got their land as a pattas as a result of their encroachment, but those lands are not useful for agriculture. So many families are utilizing those lands as a grassland, but this fact is not known to administration. So there should be a systematic program of using agricultural land as a grassland and fodder land, and there is a need to really develop parts like Eastern Vidarbha, Western Vidarbha into livestock hub. Actually, Kelkar Samiti documented this fact and suggested that Eastern Vidarbha should be utilized for livestock development, and we have history of livestock based communities and livelihoods. So I think tiger conservation model is not suitable, not only because of critical issues like land availability. Private land is very huge to use by government. There are many issues. So I think community involvement in livelihood development and ecology is the only way behind.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. I think we have time for one last question. Pradeep Devar Chetty. His question is, sir, how cotton cultivation is related to drought? Does it need more water?
Very interesting question. Land covered with grassland and land covered with cotton plant has different reactions to rains, different reactions to soil moisture, different reactions to groundwater. As you can visualize that the land covered with a grass or traditional grass species can hold water, rainwater as a sponge. But agricultural land and cotton plant cannot do that. So there is a huge, there was a huge land soil degradation happened. Then there was huge wells digged for the cotton cultivation. Then there was a huge construction work happen, construction of big dams happen through British era that resulted into a drought.
Okay.
It's not simply like cotton required more water. So that is a complex ecological transformation happened, and that conversion of grassland into agricultural land happens nearly about 70 years, which is a very big time. And then additionally, the huge amount of land converted. So that resulted into Dr. Lakshman Satta documented only drought, but we eventually know that we have huge biodiversity loss, then we have huge cropping, traditional crop varieties lost, then we have huge livestock breeds lost. So these are there.
Right. Thank you, sir. I think I missed one question from Dr. Sheetal. I think her question was, what is the update in reintroduction of cheetahs in India? Will this be beneficial or problematic?
Very interesting question. It will be definitely problematic because we have altogether different kind of land use. We have altogether different kind of livelihoods. We have altogether different kind of communities. I think even today we are facing man-animal conflict surrounding national park and sanctuaries. So it will eventually create a big problem. And before, this is like welcoming someone into home without having food or without having any shelter. So we don't have conservation plan for black bugs. We don't have a conservation plan for habitat like grasslands, and we are trying to introduce cheetahs. So I don't think that it will be beneficial. It's a fancy kind of step taken by forest department. which creates huge problem and people will not tolerate. I think there is a requirement of good grassland development for the sake of livelihood and livestock development. Then we can definitely introduce cheetahs.
Yes. I'll just take one last question from Shailesh. Shailesh, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
No, I had the same question. It got answered. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shailesh. With this, I think we come to the end of this really fascinating and deeply knowledgeable session today. I'll just go ahead. The thanks are not enough, I guess, to both the speakers, but need to do the formality. So it was a wonderful session, extensively informative. We got to know so many facts about the region and something that we were not knowing till now. Thank you, Pradyumna sir, for a wonderful introduction. With that, I think Kaustup sir's talk was even more relatable. Kaustup sir, thank you so much for the in-depth presentation and your patience for the question and answer session also later. Thank you so much. Sneha, thank you so much for moderating this event so wonderfully. You were great. Thank you. A formal thank you to our donor, Stone Studio, for facilitating today's event. Thank you, Shrikant and Aditi, for all the technical support you have been giving us throughout. And last but not the least, thank you so much, all the participants, for the overwhelming participation to the event. At one point, we were almost 100 of us. It was wonderful. It's almost like a packed audience in an auditorium. So thank you, each and every one of you. Next Sunday, the session, the part 2 of the session will be there. We hope to see you all next Sunday as well. Have a good day. And again, thanks to be part of ISOLA session. Thank you so much.
I must thankful for ISOLA. I forgot to mention that. I'm sorry for that.
Sir.
And additionally, I must appreciate the gender balance of within participants. I'm very happy that so many female participants are there, which was very good. I am also very thankful. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It was a pleasure having you.
Thanks.
And I hope ISOLA can continue having association with you, maybe on ground. We can discuss how we can work together. It will be a pleasure.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a good day, everyone.
Yeah.